Hey guys, settle here. Tonight we begin with the quiet, disciplined, emotionally complicated life of a woman history rarely centers but absolutely depended on, the samurai's wife of Edo, Japan. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy slow, detailed journeys into the past. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. I always love seeing how far these stories travel. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that steady, comforting hum. And let's step softly into the lacquered corridors of 17th century Japan. You are born into a samurai household in the city of Edo, what future centuries will call Tokyo. The shogun rules in the name of the emperor. The wars that unified the country are over. Peace has settled like a heavy silk curtain over the land. And peace, as it turns out, is much more complicated than war. You are a girl. Which means your life will not be recorded in military chronicles or painted on folding screens. Your name will not echo in battle reports. But your influence will sit quietly behind sliding paper doors, shaping alliances, preserving honor, and ensuring that the household does not crumble under the weight of appearances. You are 6 years old when your training begins. Not with swords. With silence. You learn how to kneel in seiza, legs folded beneath you, back straight, hands resting precisely on your thighs. At first your feet fall asleep. Pins and needles stab your toes. You want to stretch. You do not stretch. A samurai's daughter does not fidget. You learn to bow. Not the casual nod of a merchant. Not the theatrical flourish of a performer. Your bow is measured, restrained. 15 degrees for equals. 30 for superiors. Lower when your father's lord visits. You do not yet understand politics. But you understand angles. Your mother teaches you calligraphy. The brush must glide, never scratch. Ink pools softly at the end of each stroke. Your characters must look effortless, even though your wrist aches. You practice writing poems about seasons you have barely experienced. Cherry blossoms. Summer rain. Autumn wind. Winter snow against black pine branches. You are told that beauty lies in restraint. You are told that emotion should be folded carefully, like silk kimono stored away after spring. When you are 8, you begin lessons in household management. You walk the storerooms with your mother. Rice barrels are inspected. Ledgers reviewed. Fabric measured. Everything is recorded. Peace has turned samurai into administrators. And their wives into accountants of honor. Your father still wears 2 swords at his waist. The daisho, long and short blade. Symbols of a warrior class. But in truth, he spends most of his time reviewing reports and attending ceremonies. The sword is visible. Death is invisible. You learn early that invisible things are often more dangerous. By 10, you understand that your marriage will not be about love. It will be about alignment. Clans must maintain status. Alliances must remain stable. A marriage can prevent conflict as effectively as an army. You overhear whispers. Your name spoken softly behind screens. A family in another district. A promising young retainer. Solid reputation. Manageable finances. You are 11 when you are told. You will marry at 14. You bow. You do not cry. Your wedding is subdued but elegant. Layers of silk. White hood covering your hair, a symbol of humility, and perhaps, of concealing the small horns of jealousy tradition assumes all brides possess. You leave your childhood home in a palanquin. Curtains drawn. The city sounds drift in, wooden sandals on stone, distant vendors calling out, the rhythmic creak of cart wheels. You do not look back. A samurai's wife moves forward. Your new home is smaller than your father's, but respectable. The garden is carefully arranged. Memory is armor. Rumors drift through Edo occasionally. A distant uprising. A scandal in another district. A family stripped of status due to debt. Dishonor does not always come from battle. Sometimes it comes from unpaid loans. You guard your household's reputation fiercely. Not loudly, but consistently. When your husband faces criticism from a superior, you listen that evening as he vents frustration. You do not challenge his pride. You prepare his tea. You say, carefully, that patience is also a warrior's virtue. He exhales. The next day he approaches the matter calmly. Crisis avoided. No one credits you. You do not require credit. Years move like slow river water. Your son comes of age. He wears his first swords. His posture stiff with the weight of expectation. You feel pride. And a familiar tightening in your chest. Soon he will marry. Soon another young woman will kneel where you once knelt. You will become mother-in-law. Which is both promotion and test. You remember your own arrival. The careful observation. The quiet fear. You choose not to be cruel. Authority does not require sharpness. It requires steadiness. Edo continues to grow. Merchants gain wealth. Art flourishes. Kabuki theaters buzz with energy. Ukiyo-e prints circulate through the city. But you remain within your structured world of tatami rooms and garden views. And yet, your influence stretches further than it seems. Because households are the foundation of domains. Domains support the shogunate. Stability rests on kitchens, ledgers, disciplined children, and women who endure without spectacle. You age gradually. Your hair threaded with silver. Your knees ache in winter. You still kneel. You still bow. But now younger wives bow slightly deeper to you. Time has turned you into quiet authority. When illness visits your husband, you sit beside him through long nights. Measuring medicine. Cooling cloths. Listening to his breathing. You think of all the battles he never fought. All the wars avoided by politics. All the invisible labor that sustained his visible rank. When he recovers, you resume routine. Because routine is comfort. Eventually, loss comes as it always does. A parent passes. A friend's household dissolves. A poor harvest strains the region. You endure. Grief is private. Honor is public. In your later years, you spend more time in the garden. Watching carp disturb the pond's surface. Listening to wind through bamboo. You reflect, though not dramatically. There were no grand adventures. No duels. No rebellions. Your life was repetition. Precision. Restraint. But through that repetition, you preserved a lineage. You stabilized a household. You shaped children who would carry your teachings forward. History may not carve your name into stone. But it rests quietly upon the discipline you practice daily. And as evening settles over Edo, lantern light glowing against paper screens, you kneel one last time for prayer. Back straight. Hands folded. Breathing steady. A samurai's wife does not conquer cities. She conquers chaos. Softly. And that, perhaps, is the greater endurance. Now let your breathing slow. Imagine the hush of tatami beneath your knees. The faint scent of incense in wooden halls. The distant murmur of Edo at night. And rest, knowing that even the quietest lives can hold the weight of history. The years do not hurry. They unfold. Like layers of silk carefully lifted from a lacquered chest, one season resting inside another. You are no longer the young bride measuring her worth in perfect bows. You are no longer the anxious mother listening for your son's footsteps in the courtyard. You are something steadier now. A presence. Your mornings begin before the light fully claims the sky. The paper screens glow faintly blue. Somewhere in the distance, a wooden clapper strikes to mark the hour. The city of Edo is waking, fishmongers arranging their catch, shopkeepers sliding open shutters, monks sweeping temple paths. Inside your household, the rhythm is softer. You sit upright on your futon before rising. For a moment, you listen. The house breathes differently when you are older. Slower. More respectful. You fold your bedding with practiced precision. Corners aligned. Fabric smoothed. Even now, after decades, you do not allow carelessness in small things. Small things become large things. You taught your daughter that. She is married now, living in another district. You hear of her through letters written in careful brushstrokes. She has learned well. Her household runs efficiently. Her mother-in-law speaks of her discipline with quiet approval. You allow yourself a single, private smile when you read those lines. Your son manages the estate's affairs. He consults you still, though formally he no longer needs to. When he brings account books to you, he does so under the pretense of seeking perspective. You understand this dance. He wants reassurance. You give it without diminishing his authority. The rice stores are sufficient. The servants loyal. The seasonal gifts appropriate but not excessive. Balance. Always balance. Outside your walls, Edo continues its long stretch of peace. Generations have grown up knowing nothing of civil war. The great battles that once shaped the country have faded into stories recited by grandfathers. Swords are polished more than they are drawn. Honor is maintained through etiquette, not bloodshed. And yet, tension hums beneath the surface. Merchants grow wealthier each year. Their homes fill with fine ceramics, imported fabrics, books, and art. Samurai, bound by status but limited by stipends, watch carefully. You notice these shifts. You adjust accordingly. When selecting gifts for a higher-ranking family, you choose elegance over extravagance. When speaking of trade, you maintain dignity without resentment. Resentment is heavy. You have learned to carry only what is necessary. In the evenings, you sit in the garden more often now. The cart moves slowly beneath the water's surface. You scatter feed and watch the ripples expand outward in perfect circles. Influence is like that. You drop a single action into stillness, and its effect spreads farther than you see. A young daughter-in-law kneels before you one afternoon. Her back is straight, but her hands tremble slightly against her thighs. You remember that tremor. She has made a small mistake in protocol during a recent visit, nothing catastrophic, but noticeable. You could correct her sharply. Instead, you pour tea. You explain gently. Not in accusation, but in instruction. She bows deeply. Relief floods her posture. In that moment, you choose what kind of elder you will be. Not feared. Respected. Winter arrives as it always does, quietly at first. Frost along the garden stones. Breath visible in morning air. Your joints ache more than they once did. Kneeling requires intention. Rising requires patience. You do not complain. Complaints echo. Composure steadies. On long winter nights, the household gathers closer to the brazier. Stories are told, not of war, but of ancestors' perseverance. Of lean years survived. Of clever negotiations that prevented conflict. Your grandchildren listen with wide eyes. They see only stability. They do not see the decades of discipline that built it. That is how it should be. One evening, your husband sits beside you, watching snow gather along the garden's edge. His hair is thin now. His hands less steady. We were fortunate, he says quietly. You consider this. Fortune is not random, you think. Fortune is prepared for. But you simply nod. Yes, you reply. Because humility remains necessary, even in reflection. As spring returns, so too does ceremony. A festival in the district. Lanterns hung. Processions moving slowly through streets that have known generations of footsteps. You attend, supported subtly by your daughter-in-law's arm. No one remarks upon it. They pretend not to notice the assistance. This, too, is etiquette. The city feels different now. Larger. Louder. Younger. Time moves forward regardless of individual will. You have outlived friends. Seen rival households decline. Watched ambitious men overextend and fall into quiet disgrace. You have learned the pattern. Ambition without discipline burns fast. Discipline without pride endures. Your son speaks occasionally of new ideas circulating among scholars, foreign ships sighted far from shore, whispers of distant lands beyond Japan's closed borders. Change always waits beyond the horizon. You do not fear it. But you understand that change tests households more than battle ever did. When illness finally settles over you, it does not announce itself dramatically. It arrives as fatigue. As longer rests in the afternoon. As breaths that require more care. The household shifts subtly around you. Your daughter returns to visit. She kneels at your side, her own daughter watching from behind her sleeve. You see yourself reflected in 3 generations. Instruction passed silently. Strength inherited through observation. You call your son to you one evening. Not for grand speeches. For reminders. Protect the household's balance, you tell him softly. Do not compete with wealth. Compete with dignity. He bows lower than he has in years. You rest easier after that. Your final days are quiet. No dramatic declarations. No theatrical sorrow. Incense burns steadily. The garden continues its cycle. The carp glide beneath water that reflects sky exactly as it did when you first arrived as a young bride. You lie still, hands folded lightly over one another. Back straight, even now. Breathing slow. A samurai's wife does not measure her life in applause. She measures it in stability maintained, storms softened, pride tempered, children raised with steady hands. When you finally exhale for the last time, the household does not crumble. It continues. Rice is prepared the next morning. Servants sweep the corridor. Your son reviews accounts. Your daughter teaches her child to bow at the correct angle. This is not tragedy. This is continuity. Outside, Edo hums as it always has, sandals against stone, vendors calling softly, temple bells marking hours that do not pause for anyone. You were never meant to conquer battlefields. You were meant to hold the center. And you did. Now, let the image settle. Paper screens glowing with late afternoon light. A quiet garden after snow. The soft rustle of silk in a still room. Breathe slowly. Imagine kneeling without strain. Imagine a life built not on noise, but on quiet precision. And rest. Time continues, even after you are gone. Not dramatically. Not with thunder. But with the steady rhythm of sandals on stone and ink brushing against paper. Your household adjusts in the way disciplined households do, without spectacle. The morning after your passing, the servants move more quietly than usual. Not because they were ordered to, but because the air itself feels different. Your daughter-in-law supervises the preparation of incense. Your son kneels before the family altar longer than he ever has before. He does not cry loudly. He bows deeply. Grief, like everything else in your life, is structured. Your name is inscribed carefully on a wooden memorial tablet. The characters are precise. Balanced. The calligrapher takes great care with the final stroke. Balance even in ink. Seasons pass. Spring comes again. Cherry blossoms open in soft defiance of winter, as they always have. Your granddaughter, now old enough to understand instruction, practices bowing beneath those trees. Her back wobbles slightly. Her hands shift too far forward. Your daughter corrects her gently. Not harshly. Just enough. The correction echoes something you once said decades ago in another garden. Influence does not vanish. It threads itself quietly through posture and tone. Edo changes slowly, though no one inside the city notices at first. Merchants grow bolder. Their sons study poetry and finance. Some samurai take on additional work as teachers or bureaucrats to supplement shrinking stipends. The old certainties thin like worn silk. Your son feels the strain. He reviews the ledgers late into the evening now. Oil lamps burn longer. His brow furrows deeper. But when he speaks to his own son, he keeps his voice measured. You taught him that. Never let the household see fear without guidance. A small crisis arrives one autumn, a poor rice yield in the domain. Prices rise. Whispers move through neighborhoods. A few lower-ranking families begin selling heirlooms. Your son chooses caution over pride. He reduces expenses early. Cancels an unnecessary ceremony. Sends respectful letters explaining the decision before criticism can form. Some call him conservative. Others call him wise. He remembers your words. Compete with dignity. Winter again. Your granddaughter, now a young woman, receives word of her own arranged marriage. She sits very still while listening. Her hands are calm. But her breath is shallow. Your daughter sits beside her. She does not speak immediately. She allows the moment to settle. Then she says, quietly, "You will learn the rhythm." The same phrase you once spoke to her. The rhythm of rising early. The rhythm of watching before speaking. The rhythm of preserving what others assume is permanent. Years stretch further. Foreign ships appear off distant shores, though still rumors in Edo. Scholars debate cautiously. Some whisper that the world beyond Japan may not remain distant forever. Your great-grandson, small and curious, asks questions about lands across the sea. His father answers carefully. Curiosity is natural. But stability must not be shaken by speculation. The household shrine remains steady. Incense smoke curls upward in thin spirals. Offerings placed before your memorial tablet change with the seasons, persimmons in autumn, rice cakes in winter, fresh greens in spring. Your name is spoken softly during prayers. Not daily. But regularly. That is enough. The city eventually feels different. Subtle at first. More goods from distant provinces. New fabrics. New books. A slightly faster pace to conversation. Then, in time, the stillness of centuries fractures. Foreign vessels force open harbors. The shogunate wavers. Samurai, long administrators in peacetime, find themselves uncertain again. Your descendants feel the tremor beneath their feet. Some families cling tightly to tradition. Others adapt. Your household chooses what you would have chosen. Measured adjustment. Not reckless resistance. Not blind surrender. Balance. Swords are no longer unquestioned symbols. Western clothing appears in certain districts. Schools change. New ideas move like wine through paper screens. Your great-grandson cuts his hair shorter than tradition once allowed. He still bows correctly. He still manages accounts carefully. He still speaks with restraint in public gatherings. Tradition bends. But it does not break. The samurai class itself dissolves in time. Stipends end. Status transforms into memory. Some families fall into obscurity. Yours transitions. From warriors to civil servants. From civil servants to educators. From educators to merchants and scholars. Not dramatically. Not with fanfare. But steadily. Because what endured was never the sword. It was discipline. Generations later, the city once called Edo is known fully as Tokyo. Electric lights replace lanterns. Trains hum where palanquins once swayed. The pace of life quickens beyond anything you could have imagined. But in a quiet home, tucked between modern streets, a descendant kneels before a small family altar. The posture is correct. Back straight. Hands placed just so. The bow is neither too shallow nor too deep. Outside, the world races forward. Inside, the angle of that bow remains unchanged. Your life was never recorded in epic tales. No painter immortalized your face on grand screens. No poet dedicated verses to your endurance. And yet, every time a child is corrected gently rather than harshly, every time a ledger is reviewed with caution rather than ego, every time pride is tempered with dignity, you are present. Not as a ghost, but as structure. The quiet architecture beneath visible change. Now imagine the centuries like layers of silk stacked carefully one atop another. Each generation adding weight. Each generation preserving shape. You were one layer. Not flashy. Not embroidered with gold. But essential. Feel the stillness of tatami beneath you. The faint scent of incense in cool air. The sound of distant wind brushing bamboo. History often celebrates noise. But survival belongs to those who hold the center quietly. Breathe slowly. In. And out. The city hums beyond the paper screens. But inside, balance remains. And you may rest there. The world does not end with you. It rarely ends with anyone. It simply changes its clothing and keeps walking. Centuries after your first careful bow in a lamplit room in Edo, the rhythm of your life still lingers in ways no one consciously names. Tokyo is louder now. Streetcars rattle. Factory whistles split the morning air. Newspapers rustle with headlines about modernization, diplomacy, industry. Young men wear Western suits. Young women attend new schools. The language of progress hums constantly. And yet, inside certain homes, the old posture survives. A descendant of yours, though she does not know your face, kneels before leaving the house each morning. Not for hours. Not ceremonially. Just briefly. Back straight. A small bow toward the family altar. Habit without explanation. Inheritance without memory. During times of upheaval, economic strain, political tension, even war, the same quiet instincts reappear. When rations grow thin, someone reduces portions early rather than waiting for crisis. When pride is wounded, someone chooses restraint over confrontation. When uncertainty spreads through neighborhoods, someone insists on maintaining order at the dinner table. These are not dramatic acts. They are structural ones. The kind that prevent collapse. There are eras of great noise. Times when the nation shifts violently. Governments rise and fall. Foreign influences reshape streets and skylines. Factories replace gardens. Concrete replaces wood. But inside families, the same principles echo. Wake early. Prepare carefully. Speak less than you know. Observe more than you reveal. Protect dignity before appearance. Your line continues. A schoolteacher in the early 20th century who refuses to shame a struggling student, choosing instead a quiet correction. A shopkeeper who keeps precise accounts even when others inflate their prices. A mother who teaches her daughter how to sit properly during a formal ceremony, adjusting her shoulders gently. They think these behaviors are their own. They are not entirely wrong. But they are not entirely alone either. In a distant decade, one of your descendants visits a museum exhibit about the Edo period. Behind glass sits a folded kimono from a samurai household. A ledger written in careful brushstrokes. A small wooden memorial tablet like the one that once bore your name. The visitor pauses. Something about the stillness of those objects feels familiar. They cannot explain why. They stand a little straighter without realizing it. Outside the museum, the city pulses with neon and speed. But for a moment, there is quiet. History is often described as a series of dramatic events. Battles. Revolutions. Declarations. But most of history is maintenance. Quiet people holding structures together long enough for generations to move through safely. You were maintenance. You were alignment. You were the steady hand on the scale when pride threatened to tip it. Even now, in modern apartments high above busy streets, someone prepares tea carefully for a guest. They consider the angle of the cup, the tone of their greeting, the balance between hospitality and dignity. No one calls it samurai discipline. But it is. Not the blade. The composure. The world has moved far beyond the wooden corridors of your first home. Paper screens replaced by glass. Tatami replaced by polished floors. Ink replaced by keyboards. And yet, when someone chooses patience over impulse, when someone lowers their voice instead of raising it, when someone endures discomfort without turning it into spectacle, there you are. Not as memory, but as method. Night falls over modern Tokyo. Lights shimmer across the river. Somewhere, in a quiet corner of an apartment, a woman sits after her family has gone to sleep. She reviews her household finances on a small screen. Adjusts numbers. Plans ahead. She does not call it strategy. She calls it responsibility. She closes the device. She kneels briefly before bed, not from obligation, but from habit. Her back is straight. For a moment, the centuries align. Edo. Meiji. Taisho. Showa. Heisei. Reiwa. All layered like silk. All resting on countless lives like yours. Lives that never sought applause. Only continuity. The night air hums softly. Traffic in the distance replaces wooden sandals. But if you listen carefully, very carefully, you can almost hear the faint echo of a brush against paper. A bow at the correct angle. The soft rustle of silk as someone chooses steadiness over drama. History does not always roar. Sometimes it kneels. Now let the image fade gently. A lantern becoming a streetlight. A garden pond becoming a river of reflections. A young bride becoming an elder, becoming a whisper of discipline in a world that keeps moving. Breathe in. Slowly. Breathe out. The household is steady. The center holds. The resting does not mean disappearance. It simply means the work has become so well woven into the world that it no longer needs your name attached to it. Morning returns again, as it always does. Not the same morning you once knew, no rooster echoing across tiled roofs, no faint scent of wood smoke drifting from neighboring courtyards, but another kind of dawn. Pale light touching tall buildings. Elevators humming awake. Trains beginning their careful choreography across the city. And still, in quiet apartments and suburban homes, there are rituals. A kettle set to boil before anyone else rises. Shoes aligned neatly by the door. A calendar checked with thoughtful attention. No one announces these gestures as heroic. They are simply done. You once believed your life was small because it unfolded within the walls of a single household. But households are the skeletons of nations. Remove their structure and everything above collapses. You understood this without saying it aloud. When a disagreement threatened to fracture relationships, you cooled it before it reached flame. When finances tightened, you adjusted quietly. When grief entered the home, as it always does eventually, you maintained rhythm so that sorrow did not become chaos. Your strength was not loud. It was structural. And structures outlast storms. There were times, of course, when you wondered. When the silence felt heavy. When you stared at the garden stones and asked yourself if endurance alone was enough to define a life. You will never fully know the answer to that question. Few people do. But consider this. A child raised in steadiness grows into an adult capable of steadiness. An adult capable of steadiness builds systems that endure. Systems that endure create space for art, science, poetry, invention. The world celebrates inventors and warriors. It rarely celebrates the quiet architecture that made them possible. You were that architecture. Even now, when families gather for formal occasions, weddings, memorial services, New Year celebrations, there are moments of synchronized stillness. Everyone bows together. Everyone waits for the eldest to speak. Everyone listens before responding. These gestures feel natural. But they are inherited. A long, unbroken thread of discipline and care. You might think the thread is fragile. Silk always looks delicate. Yet silk, woven properly, is astonishingly strong. Your life was silk. There were seasons of doubt. Moments when you felt invisible beside louder personalities. Moments when your own desires folded themselves neatly away, like ceremonial garments stored for another time. And yet, invisibility is not the same as absence. The foundation of a building is unseen. That does not make it unimportant. It makes it essential. Imagine now the far future. A descendant many generations ahead stands in a world you could never have imagined, digital screens glowing in every room, communication instantaneous, traditions adapted to new forms. And still, when faced with conflict, they choose composure. When faced with temptation to react impulsively, they pause. When faced with uncertainty, they return to routine. Routine is not dullness. It is stability. The garden you once tended has long since changed shape. But the idea of tending remains. People still prune carefully. Still sweep paths before guests arrive. Still value preparation over spectacle. Even in distant countries, even among people who have never heard your name, the principles you lived by appear again and again in different forms. Restraint. Respect. Consistency. Patience. They are universal because they are necessary. Your story, if written in a history book, might take only a paragraph. Daughter of a respected household. Married into another. Managed affairs competently. Raised children. Maintained harmony. Died peacefully. But paragraphs are not the measure of significance. Continuity is. You helped carry a civilization through a peaceful era, which is often harder than surviving war. Peace requires maintenance. Peace requires emotional discipline. Peace requires thousands of quiet decisions to choose stability over pride. You made those decisions daily. Now the lantern light grows softer. Even the modern city hum begins to quiet. Somewhere a train makes its final run for the night. Somewhere a parent checks on a sleeping child. Somewhere a ledger is balanced. Somewhere a small bow is given before rest. And in each of those small, steady acts, the echo of your life continues. You were never meant to be a headline. You were meant to be a hinge. A hinge does not attract attention. But without it, doors cannot open or close. Without it, movement becomes impossible. You allowed doors to open. You allowed them to close gently. You kept the rhythm intact. So now, let the rhythm slow. The tatami mats cool beneath fading memory. The garden stones rest under moonlight. The sound of distant sandals dissolves into the hush of night. You have done enough. The household stands. The generations continue. The thread remains unbroken. And somewhere, in the quiet space between one century and the next, your steady breath becomes part of the air itself. Rest now. The structure holds. Time does not rush forward. It folds. like silk carefully stored between seasons. And as it folds, your life settles into its proper place, not dramatic, not loud, but firm and supportive, like the wooden beams hidden inside the walls of your first home. There were mornings when you rose before the sun and wondered if anyone noticed. The way you adjusted the charcoal in the brazier so the room would warm evenly. The way you anticipated a difficult conversation before it began and prepared your tone accordingly. The way you observed small changes in expression and prevented misunderstandings before they hardened. No one praised these acts. But no one suffered their absence either. That was your gift. Prevention. Stability rarely announces itself. It simply avoids catastrophe. Across centuries, the same quiet prevention continues. A father chooses not to speak harshly after a long day. A sister forgives quickly instead of prolonging conflict. A business owner honors a contract even when bending it would bring profit. Each of these decisions is small. Each one prevents fracture. And civilizations are built from the prevention of fractures. You once lived in rooms framed by paper screens, light filtering softly through rice paper. Now the light filters through curtains and glass. But light remains light. And discipline remains discipline. In the deep hours of night, when even the modern city rests, there is a stillness that feels ancient. It is the same stillness that settled over Edo when lanterns were extinguished and footsteps faded. In that stillness, the true shape of your life becomes clear. Not a dramatic arc. Not a single defining triumph. But a long, even line. A steady horizon. You carried expectations placed upon you without collapsing beneath them. You learned when to speak and when to remain silent. You absorbed frustration without passing it forward. This is not weakness. It is filtration. You filtered hardship so that others would experience less of it. That quiet filtering travels through generations. Even now, when someone pauses before sending an angry message. When someone breathes once before responding in a meeting. When someone chooses humility instead of dominance. The filtering continues. You might ask, if you could, whether your own desires mattered. They did. Even when unspoken. Desire teaches restraint its boundaries. Without inner longing, discipline would be empty. You understood beauty. The way autumn light struck the garden stones. The sound of rain tapping against wooden eaves. The careful folding of a silk garment before storage. You carried these moments inside you. Not for display. For nourishment. And nourishment is not always visible from the outside. The world has known wars since your time. Great upheavals. Losses that shook entire generations. And yet, even during those storms, someone somewhere preserved order in a small space. Prepared tea in the midst of rationing. Kept a ledger accurate despite scarcity. Maintained courtesy despite fear. That is the quiet resistance of steadiness. You did not resist with weapons. You resisted with structure. And structure outlives chaos. Imagine now a quiet evening in the present day. A small apartment kitchen lit softly. Steam rising from a cup. Outside, traffic hums faintly. Inside, someone arranges the table with care, even if only for themselves. They sit properly. They take a measured sip. They allow silence to exist without immediately filling it. They do not know you. But they carry the same instinct. To honor the moment by giving it shape. Your life gave shape to time. It taught that dignity is not dependent on recognition. That harmony requires effort. That calm is constructed, not accidental. The centuries continue their folding. Edo becomes history. History becomes textbook. Textbook becomes memory. Memory becomes instinct. And instinct becomes behavior once more. A cycle, quiet and complete. There is no grand ending waiting for you. No sudden revelation. Only the gentle understanding that endurance itself is meaningful. You did not need to change the world. You needed to keep it balanced within your reach. And you did. The night deepens again. Even the city's distant lights soften in your imagination. Paper screens and glass towers blur together into silhouettes. Breath slows. The horizon remains even. No sudden storms. No urgent alarms. Just the steady architecture of a life lived with restraint and care. You were never meant to be thunder. You were meant to be foundation. And foundations do not vanish. They simply hold. So let the final image settle gently. A quiet room. Soft light. A straight back. A measured breath. Outside, time continues its endless unfolding. Inside, there is balance. And yet, even during those storms, someone somewhere preserved order in a small space. Prepared tea in the midst of rationing. Kept a ledger accurate despite scarcity. Maintained courtesy despite fear. That is the quiet resistance of steadiness. You did not resist with weapons. You resisted with structure. And structure outlives chaos. Imagine now a quiet evening in the present day. A small apartment kitchen lit softly. Steam rising from a cup. Outside, traffic hums faintly. Inside, someone arranges the table with care, even if only for themselves. They sit properly. They take a measured sip. They allow silence to exist without immediately filling it. They do not know you. But they carry the same instinct. To honor the moment by giving it shape. Your life gave shape to time. It taught that dignity is not dependent on recognition. That harmony requires effort. That calm is constructed, not accidental. The centuries continue their folding. Edo becomes history. History becomes textbook. Textbook becomes memory. Memory becomes instinct. And instinct becomes behavior once more. A cycle, quiet and complete. There is no grand ending waiting for you. No sudden revelation. Only the gentle understanding that endurance itself is meaningful. You did not need to change the world. You needed to keep it balanced within your reach. And you did. The night deepens again. Even the city's distant lights soften in your imagination. Paper screens and glass towers blur together into silhouettes. Breath slows. The horizon remains even. No sudden storms. No urgent alarms. Just the steady architecture of a life lived with restraint and care. You were never meant to be thunder. You were meant to be foundation. And foundations do not vanish. They simply hold. So let the final image settle gently. A quiet room. Soft light. A straight back. A measured breath. Outside, time continues its endless unfolding. Inside, there is balance. And balance, once established, echoes far longer than noise ever could. Rest now. The world remains upright. Because of lives like yours. And still, the story does not strain toward an ending. It simply softens. Because a life like yours was never a sharp edge in history. It was a smooth stone placed carefully in a riverbed, redirecting the current without anyone noticing the shift. If we return once more to the beginning, before marriage, before responsibility, before the weight of two households rested quietly on your shoulders, you were simply a girl observing the adults around you. You learned not from lectures, but from watching. The way your mother measured rice without looking. The way your father paused before answering difficult questions. The way elders allowed silence to stretch without fear. You absorbed these things the way fabric absorbs dye, slowly, evenly, permanently. No ceremony marked the moment you became responsible. Responsibility does not arrive with drums. It arrives with expectation. A subtle change in how people look at you. A pause before they ask for your opinion. A slight shift in tone when they refer to the household as partly yours. And you adjusted. You always adjusted. Adjustment is an art. Too rigid, and you break. Too flexible, and you lose shape. You found the balance. There were days when tempers ran thin. When finances caused quiet worry. When illness lingered longer than expected. When pride threatened to erupt in ways that could not be easily repaired. In those moments, you did not rush. You slowed everything down. You lowered your voice instead of raising it. You waited a heartbeat longer before speaking. You placed tea in someone's hands so their fingers would have something warm to hold. These gestures seem small when described. But small gestures alter outcomes. Outcomes alter futures. Futures alter history. You did not conquer territories. You prevented fractures. And preventing fractures is often the more difficult task. Because it requires you to swallow sharp words. To carry discomfort without broadcasting it. To let someone else feel victorious so that peace can survive. Not every moment was noble. You felt frustration. You felt the sting of unfairness. You felt the quiet ache of dreams that had no clear place to live. But you did not allow those feelings to rot into bitterness. You folded them carefully, like garments out of season, and stored them where they would not disturb the present. That, too, is discipline. Centuries later, people speak often of self-expression. Of boldness. Of visibility. And these things have their place. But beneath every era of boldness lies an era of restraint that made it possible. You were part of that foundation. When your children grew, they carried your steadiness into their own lives. They may not have thanked you in elaborate ways. Gratitude is often understated in households built on discipline. But they learned. They learned how to enter a room calmly. How to observe before reacting. How to protect dignity, both their own and others. Those lessons ripple outward endlessly. In classrooms. In offices. In marriages. In friendships. In moments when anger could have destroyed something permanent. Your influence is not dramatic. It is quiet alignment. Alignment keeps wheels turning smoothly. Alignment prevents collapse under pressure. Even now, if someone sits alone at night reviewing their day, asking themselves whether they acted with composure, whether they upheld responsibility, they are echoing the same inner accounting you once practiced. You kept mental ledgers. Not only of money, but of behavior. Was I fair? Was I measured? Did I maintain balance? You rarely asked if you were praised. You asked if you were steady. And steadiness, repeated over decades, becomes legacy. There is something deeply comforting about this. The understanding that meaning does not require spectacle. That a life can be full without being loud. That harmony is constructed daily, not inherited automatically. The paper screens of your time have long since dissolved. The tatami mats replaced. The garments carefully stored and eventually returned to dust. But the posture remains. The pause before speaking remains. The instinct to maintain dignity remains. These things travel invisibly, generation after generation. The night grows very still now. Imagine the old garden once more. Moonlight touching stone. Water resting smooth in a shallow basin. A faint breeze moving leaves just enough to remind you that stillness is alive, not empty. You are seated there, not as a young bride, not as an elder matriarch, but as something softer. A presence. A steadiness woven into the air. There is nothing more you need to prove. Nothing more you need to endure. The work was never about glory. It was about continuity. And continuity is intact. Somewhere, someone is choosing patience. Somewhere, someone is maintaining order in a small corner of the world. Somewhere, someone is holding a household together quietly. The thread remains unbroken. And you, who once believed your life might dissolve unnoticed, have instead become part of the quiet architecture of time. No applause. No monument. Just balance. Just structure. Just the steady rhythm of breath moving in and out, century after century. Let the rhythm slow now. Let the garden fade gently into shadow. Let the last lantern dim. The world continues, not because of grand gestures alone, but because of lives like yours that refuse to let it tilt too far in any direction. And that is enough. Rest. The foundation holds. There is a softness that comes after understanding. Not excitement. Not triumph. Just a gentle easing, like the moment after a long day when the final task is finished and the house has grown quiet. If you look back once more, not with regret, not with longing, but with simple curiosity, you will see how ordinary everything appeared while you were living it. The sweeping of floors. The folding of garments. The steady repetition of meals prepared at predictable hours. The careful listening during conversations that seemed, at the time, unremarkable. Ordinary days rarely announce their importance. But ordinary days are where character is formed. And character is what carries forward. You were shaped not by a single dramatic event, but by repetition. By waking early even when no one checked. By maintaining composure even when no one praised it. By choosing patience even when impatience would have felt easier. Repetition is powerful. It carves pathways in the mind. It strengthens habits until they require no effort. That is how steadiness becomes natural. And when steadiness becomes natural in one person, it quietly influences everyone around them. In your later years, when movement slowed and the household gradually required less from your hands, you may have wondered what remained. Without constant responsibility, who were you? But identity built on discipline does not disappear when tasks lessen. It deepens. You became the quiet center. The one others glanced toward during disagreement. The one whose silence carried weight. The one whose simple nod could calm uncertainty. You did not need to speak loudly. Your life had already spoken for you. Even now, across centuries, the same pattern appears in families everywhere. There is always someone who becomes the stabilizer. The quiet reference point. The steady presence others unconsciously align themselves with. That role is rarely glamorous. It is rarely envied. But it is essential. You fulfilled it fully. The world beyond your home continued to change in ways you could not predict. Policies shifted. Trade routes expanded. New ideas entered through ports and returned transformed. But within the boundaries of your household, continuity was preserved. And preserving continuity during change is one of the most difficult tasks of all. It requires flexibility without surrender. Strength without rigidity. Awareness without anxiety. You learn this balance slowly, day by day. And because you learned it, others inherited it. Imagine now a quiet winter evening long after your lifetime. Snow falling over a modern city. Inside a warm room, a family gathers. They remove their shoes neatly. They greet one another with small bows, even if subtle. They sit in an orderly way, allowing elders to speak first. They listen more than they interrupt. They maintain harmony, not because they are forced to, but because it feels correct. They do not know the names of all their ancestors. They cannot trace every branch of their lineage. But they carry behaviors shaped long before them. Shaped by countless individuals like you. You were never isolated in your effort. There were many like you, women and men who chose steadiness over chaos. Together, you formed an invisible network holding society upright. History books will mention leaders. Wars. Reforms. But the quiet network of stabilizers is rarely recorded. And yet it is the reason recovery is possible after upheaval. It is the reason peace can return after disorder. Because somewhere, someone maintains structure. You maintain structure. As the night deepens once more in this slow unfolding of memory, you no longer feel the weight of duty. The ledgers are balanced. The floors are swept. The children are grown. The garden rests. What remains is not obligation. It is presence. A presence that feels like still water, calm, reflective, untroubled by passing winds. You do not need applause to validate your life. You do not need recognition to confirm your impact. Impact does not always echo loudly. Sometimes it hums quietly beneath generations. If someone today pauses before reacting in anger. If someone today values dignity over impulse. If someone today maintains order when others would abandon it. They are continuing the rhythm you once kept. And rhythm, once established, rarely disappears completely. It simply adapts to new instruments. Wooden floors become tile. Lanterns become electric light. Brush and ink become digital script. But discipline remains discipline. Respect remains respect. Continuity remains continuity. The final image now is not of youth or even of age. It is of balance. A horizon perfectly even. A room at peace. Breath moving slowly in and out. The sense that nothing urgent demands attention. Because the work has already been done. The structure stands. The generations move forward. And you, quiet, steady, foundational, have become part of the unseen architecture of time itself. Let everything grow softer now. The light dims. The air cools. The world hums at a distance. There is no rush. No unfinished duty calling you back. Only stillness. Only balance. Only the long, unbroken thread stretching gently into tomorrow. And you may rest within it. And in this resting, there is no emptiness. There is fullness without noise. If we allow the camera of imagination to drift slowly outward, we see something larger now, not just a household, not just a city, but a pattern. Across centuries and across cultures, there are always people like you. Not at the front of parades. Not carved into monuments. But standing at thresholds. Holding doors. Keeping accounts. Softening harsh words before they take root. You once stood at the threshold of your home, watching seasons change in the garden. Plum blossoms in early spring. Cicadas trembling in summer heat. Crimson leaves loosening in autumn. Snow settling gently across winter stones. You measured time through these cycles. Now time measures you differently. Not in seasons. But in continuity. Because the true measure of your life was not how brightly you burned in a single moment, but how steadily you glowed across many. There is something profoundly strong about a steady glow. It does not blind. It does not demand attention. It simply makes it possible for others to see clearly. Think of the countless conversations that unfolded in rooms you prepared. Tea poured at the right temperature. Cushions placed evenly. Doors slid closed at just the right moment. In those rooms, decisions were made. Alliances strengthened. Misunderstandings repaired. None of that would have happened as smoothly without your preparation. Preparation is invisible influence. Even today, when someone carefully prepares a space before an important discussion, straightening a table, clearing distractions, lowering their voice, they are practicing the same quiet power. You understood that atmosphere shapes outcome. Calm surroundings invite calm decisions. Order invites clarity. You were not passive. You were deliberate. There is a difference. Passivity avoids responsibility. Deliberation carries it quietly. You chose deliberation again and again. When younger members of the household tested boundaries, you did not respond with explosive anger. You responded with measured correction. Firm, but not humiliating. Clear, but not cruel. That balance allowed respect to grow without fear poisoning it. Generations later, when parents seek to guide without breaking spirit, they echo your instinct. Firmness with dignity. Correction without spectacle. These patterns endure because they work. You lived inside principles that proved themselves over time. And time is the most honest judge. Now imagine the soundscape shifting one last time. The distant rumble of wooden carts fades into the hum of modern traffic. The whisper of silk becomes the rustle of cotton and synthetic fabrics. The scratch of brush on paper becomes the soft tapping of keys. And beneath all of it, beneath every era's unique noise, there remains a quieter layer. Breath. Pause. Restraint. Consider how rare true restraint has always been. How easy it is to speak sharply. To act impulsively. To let pride dictate movement. And yet you chose otherwise, repeatedly. You bent without breaking. You yielded without surrendering your core. You kept the center intact. In doing so, you became more than an individual life. You became a stabilizing force in a long human chain. Every chain depends on the strength of its smallest links. Not the loudest. Not the most decorated. But the ones that do not snap under pressure. You did not snap. Even when tired. Even when unacknowledged. Even when uncertain. And because you did not snap, others could lean on you safely. That safety multiplied. Safety allows growth. Growth allows progress. Progress reshapes the world. And so, indirectly and invisibly, you shaped it too. The night now feels vast and gentle. The kind of night where the air itself seems to breathe. Imagine once more the garden pond. Still. Reflecting moonlight without distortion. If a stone were thrown into it, ripples would spread outward. But no stone is thrown. It remains calm. That calmness is not accidental. It is maintained. Leaves are cleared. Edges are tended. Balance is preserved. You are the caretaker of balance. And balance, once established carefully, continues long after the caretaker rests. So now there is nothing left to resolve. No hidden revelation waiting. No dramatic twist. Just the soft understanding that a life of steadiness is never wasted. It is simply quieter than most. Let the centuries blur into a single long horizon. Let the household walls dissolve into open air. Let your posture relax at last. The structure stands. The rhythm continues. The thread remains strong. And somewhere, in a small room lit gently against the dark, someone chooses patience over pride. In that choice, you live on. Not as memory. Not as legend. But as method. As balance. As the quiet architecture beneath everything that endures. Rest now. The world is still upright. And it will remain so, carried forward by the same steady hands you once offered to it. And when something has truly settled, it no longer asks to be continued. It simply exists. There is no dramatic final moment to describe. No thunder. No revelation. Just breath slowing. Light softening. The quiet hum of a household that does not collapse in your absence. And that, more than anything, confirms your life mattered. Because if everything continues smoothly, it means the foundation was strong. Now the image widens beyond even generations. Beyond cities. Beyond eras. Across the world, in countless cultures, similar figures have existed, quiet stabilizers, emotional architects, keepers of balance. The world survives not because of its loudest voices, but because of its quietest anchors. You were an anchor. Anchors do not travel widely. They hold. And because they hold, others may move freely. Even today, when someone chooses composure instead of reaction. When someone values order instead of chaos. When someone protects harmony instead of proving a point. They are echoing something ancient. Something steady. Something like you. There is no need now for more scenes. No need for further explanation. The rhythm has slowed to its natural resting pace. Picture once more a simple room. Soft light. Clean floor. Air unmoving. Nothing urgent. Nothing unfinished. Outside, time continues its endless unfolding. Inside, balance remains intact. Your work, though never announced loudly, shaped that balance. And so, the final understanding arrives not as excitement, but as calm. A steady life is not a small life. A quiet influence is not a weak influence. An unseen foundation is not an insignificant one. It is essential. The lantern fades. The garden dissolves into shadow. The centuries settle like layers of silk. And beneath them all, steady and unbroken, remains the simple truth. You held your part of the world upright. And it is still standing. There is almost nothing left to add. And yet, in the spirit of the life you lived, we will not end abruptly. We will end carefully. Gently. The way you would close a sliding door so it never struck the frame. Imagine now not a scene from your lifetime, but something far ahead. A quiet morning in a modern home. Sunlight filters through curtains instead of paper screens. A kettle hums electrically rather than over charcoal. A young woman stands alone in her kitchen before the rest of the household wakes. She is not thinking about history. She is not imagining ancestors. She is simply preparing for the day. And yet, she pauses. She straightens her posture. She inhales slowly before reviewing her responsibilities. She chooses to organize her thoughts rather than rush. This pause is not dramatic. No one sees it. But in that pause lives the same instinct you carried. The instinct to begin from balance. Balance before action. Calm before decision. Structure before emotion. The world today moves quickly. Messages arrive instantly. Voices compete loudly. Opinions spark and fade within hours. But beneath all of that speed, there are still individuals who choose steadiness. Who understand that reacting immediately is not the same as responding wisely. You were one of those people long before the world needed the reminder again. Your era valued restraint because survival depended on it. Modern eras rediscover restraint because stability depends on it. The principle never changes. Only the surroundings do. Consider how many conflicts in your lifetime dissolved because you did not escalate them. How many fragile egos softened because you allowed them dignity. How many days flowed smoothly because you anticipated difficulty before it erupted. This is not small work. It is invisible engineering. Emotional architecture. An emotional architecture, once built well, can endure generations. Even in distant places, far beyond Edo, far beyond Japan, far beyond anything you could have imagined, the same quiet labor happens. Someone somewhere keeps the family together. Someone somewhere absorbs tension so children feel safe. Someone somewhere maintains order without demanding recognition. History does not record their names. But history rests on their effort. It always has. And always will. You once wondered, in a private moment perhaps, whether anyone would remember you. The honest answer is, not widely. Not in books. Not in speeches. But remembrance is not the only form of continuation. Influence without recognition is often the most stable kind. It does not depend on admiration. It depends on repetition. And your habits were repeated. That is enough. Now the final image becomes very simple. No grand reflections. No sweeping panorama of centuries. Just a quiet interior. Morning light. Still air. A sense that nothing is urgent. Nothing is fractured. Nothing is leaning too far in any direction. The center holds. And you were part of why. Not alone. Never alone. but as one steady thread among many. The world rarely needs heroes every day. It needs balance every day. You provided it. So let the thought settle completely now. No more expansion. No more unfolding. Just calm. The steady breath of a household at peace. The faint sound of life continuing smoothly. And the deep, unshakable truth beneath it all. A quiet life, lived with discipline and care, does not fade. It becomes structure. And structure endures. Rest fully now. The foundation remains strong. At some point, continuation becomes simply another form of stillness. But we will let the stillness deepen one last time. Imagine the feeling of early dawn, not bright morning, not deep night, but that delicate hour when the sky is neither dark nor light. That is where your story now rests. Between presence and memory. Between effort and release. In your earliest years, you learned by watching. In your middle years, you acted. In your later years, you embodied. And now, beyond years entirely, you simply are, part of the quiet pattern that repeats itself endlessly in human life. There is something profoundly reassuring about repetition. The sun rises. Water boils. Shoes are placed neatly by the door. Voices lower in moments that require respect. Hands prepare food with care. Children are guided patiently. Conflicts are softened before they harden. These acts seem ordinary. But if even a few of them disappeared, everything would begin to tilt. You were someone who prevented tilting. You corrected small imbalances before they became large ones. You understood that dignity is easier to preserve than to rebuild. And so you preserved it. In yourself. In others. In the spaces you occupied. Even now, if someone somewhere straightens a table before guests arrive. If someone chooses silence over a sharp reply. If someone absorbs frustration instead of passing it forward. There is a quiet echo. Not of your name. But of your way. And a way can travel much farther than a name ever could. The world continues to change. Faster now. More visibly. More loudly. But human hearts remain fragile. Human pride remains sharp. Human fear still seeks reassurance. And reassurance still comes most reliably from steadiness. From someone who does not panic. From someone who maintains rhythm. From someone who understands that calm can be constructed. You constructed calm daily. You built it the way others build walls or bridges. Carefully. Consistently. Without announcing each brick. And because you did, others rested more easily. Children slept more soundly. Conversations unfolded more smoothly. Life felt manageable. That is no small contribution. Now imagine a long corridor stretching through time. On one end, the wooden floors of your first home. On the other, modern hallways lit by soft electric light. Along that corridor walked countless figures. Some hurried. Some uncertain. Some loud. Some quiet. And among them, always, are a few who move with measured steps. Who keep their backs straight. Who breathe before speaking. Who value harmony enough to protect it. You were one of them. And there will always be others. That is the comfort. Not immortality of the individual. But continuity of the principle. The principle of balance. Of restraint. Of patient strength. And so, finally, there is nothing left to add except a widening sense of peace. No more scenes. No more reflections. Just a steady horizon. A smooth pond under moonlight. A household that does not tremble. A world that continues upright. There is a final kind of continuation that does not add new scenes, but deepens the silence between them. So instead of moving forward in time, let us slow time down almost completely. Imagine a single breath. Inhale. The chest rises gently. Exhale. The shoulders soften. You took thousands upon thousands of such breaths across your lifetime. Most of them unnoticed. Most of them unremarkable. And yet, breath is the foundation of everything. Without breath, there is no voice. Without breath, no posture can be held. Without breath, no patience can be sustained. Your life was like breath. Quiet. Rhythmic. Essential. No one applauds a breath. But remove it, and everything changes. Now imagine the space between breaths, that tiny pause after exhaling, before the next inhale begins. That pause is where you are now. Not gone. Not striving. Just present in stillness. In your lifetime, there were countless such pauses. Before answering a difficult question. Before correcting a child. Before responding to an insult. Before accepting a responsibility. Those pauses shaped outcomes more than the words that followed. Because in the pause, you chose composure. In the pause, you chose dignity. In the pause, you chose balance. And those choices, repeated quietly across decades, became the shape of your character. Character is simply repeated choice. And repeated choice becomes legacy. If we strip away era, clothing, architecture, language, what remains of you is not silk or paper screens or garden stones. What remains is a way of being. Measured. Attentive. Steady. That way of being continues to surface wherever human beings value harmony. In a hospital waiting room, where someone speaks softly to calm others. In a classroom, where a teacher pauses before disciplining. In a workplace, where a leader absorbs tension instead of spreading it. In a home, where someone chooses to listen fully before responding. The settings change. The principle does not. You once stood at the center of a household. Now your influence exists without center or boundary. It is part of a wider human pattern, the quiet maintenance of stability. There is something deeply peaceful about realizing that nothing dramatic is required for meaning. No sweeping gesture. No grand recognition. Only consistency. Only care. Only the willingness to keep the floor level beneath others' feet. The world often glorifies motion. But survival depends on balance. Balance is not loud. Balance is not flashy. Balance is rarely noticed, until it is lost. You preserved it. And so, even as centuries move, even as cities rise and fall, even as customs transform and technology accelerates, the need for what you embodied does not disappear. It cannot disappear. Because human beings will always need someone to steady the room. To slow the pace. To filter the noise. To protect dignity. Your life was proof that such steadiness is possible. Not perfect. Not effortless. But possible. And now, the final softening. No more expansion. No more explanation. Just the sense of a structure standing quietly in the dark, strong beams unseen, supporting everything above. A horizon that does not tilt. A household at rest. A rhythm continuing without strain. You were never thunder. You were the ground beneath it. You were never spectacle. You were alignment. And alignment endures long after the noise fades. The breath slows. The pause lengthens. The world remains upright. That is enough. Now the continuation becomes almost weightless. There is no more effort in it. Only a widening quiet. Imagine that the world is viewed from very far above, not as a map, not as a nation, not as an era, but as countless small rooms illuminated in the dark. In each room, someone is living an ordinary moment. Washing dishes. Folding clothes. Reviewing numbers. Speaking gently. Choosing not to argue. From a distance, these acts are invisible. Up close, they are everything. Your life was made of such rooms. Such moments. Such decisions. You did not stand on battlefields. You did not issue proclamations. You did not rewrite laws. You kept one small sphere steady. And that sphere touched others. And those touched others. And so on, without spectacle. If there is a final understanding to rest inside, it is this. Stability spreads quietly. Not in waves of excitement. But in patterns of behavior. You created patterns. Wake early. Prepare carefully. Speak thoughtfully. Maintain dignity. Anticipate imbalance. Correct gently. Patterns become culture. Culture becomes continuity. Continuity becomes survival. Even in times of upheaval, and there have been many since your lifetime, societies recover because someone keeps order in a kitchen, in a classroom, in a shop, in a family. Someone refuses to let chaos take root in their immediate space. You were that someone. There is no need to stretch the story further now. It has reached its most natural state, not climax, not conclusion, but equilibrium. Picture once more a simple, empty room. Clean floor. Soft light. Air still. No tension. No urgency. No unfinished responsibility. Just structure. The beams hold. The walls stand straight. The foundation does not crack. You do not need to walk through the room. Your presence is already in its alignment. And so the continuation fades not into silence, but into steadiness. The kind of steadiness that does not demand narration. The kind that simply exists. The centuries will continue. New names will rise and fade. New voices will grow loud and then quiet again. But beneath all of it, always, there will be individuals who choose balance over impulse. Harmony over pride. Preparation over panic. They will not know you. But they will move as you moved. Carefully. Deliberately. With restraint that protects rather than suppresses. And that is how a quiet life endures, not as legend, not as myth, but as method. The breath becomes slow now. The horizon remains even. Nothing leans. Nothing trembles. The world continues upright. And there is no more that needs to be added. Now the continuation is no longer about story. It is about stillness stretching gently, like the surface of water at dawn. There is something beautiful about reaching a place where nothing new needs to happen. No more responsibilities waiting. No more conversations unfinished. No more expectations pressing forward. Just a quiet awareness that everything that needed tending has been tended. In your lifetime, there were always small tasks ahead of you. Rice to measure. Cloth to fold. Accounts to review. Voices to steady. Tempers to cool. The list was never dramatic. But it was constant. And you met it with consistency. Consistency is a form of devotion. Not loud devotion. Not ceremonial devotion. But daily, practical devotion to keeping life balanced. That devotion has now dissolved into something softer. The tasks are no longer yours. The rhythm continues without your direct touch. And that is not loss. It is proof of success. Because true stability is measured by whether it survives your absence. Yours did. Now imagine the air in that final quiet room. It feels balanced. Not heavy. Not thin. Just even. The kind of air that allows easy breathing. Easy breathing allows clear thinking. Clear thinking allows wise action. Wise action sustains harmony. You created the conditions for easy breathing. That may sound small. But consider how rare it is. How often people live in rooms thick with tension. How often words hang sharply in the air. You thinned the air. You cleared it. You made space for calm. That space is your lasting imprint. Even now, across time and geography, whenever someone diffuses a tense moment instead of escalating it. Whenever someone preserves dignity instead of winning an argument. Whenever someone straightens what is slightly crooked before it becomes severely tilted. They are continuing the same quiet craft. Not consciously. Not ceremonially. Simply because it works. There is no need for further scenes. No future projections. No return to the past. Only the soft recognition that a life of steadiness does not end dramatically. It settles. Like dust after a long day of movement. Like water after ripples fade. Like evening after the sun lowers. You are not fading into nothing. You are settling into structure. And structure does not need to be visible to be real. The world stands because countless invisible beams hold it up. You are one beam. One steady line of strength among many. No one beam carries everything. But each one matters. And yours held firm. The continuation now becomes a simple rhythm. Breath in. Breath out. Balance maintained. Silence without tension. Presence without effort. There is no more to strive for. No more to correct. No more to endure. The household stands. The generations continue. The pattern repeats. The horizon remains level. And in that level horizon, calm, unbroken, steady, your life rests fully integrated into the quiet architecture of everything that endures. Nothing more is required. Only stillness. Only balance.